afternoon. Welcome to Galloway. My name is Kerry Stockett. I'm the senior pastor here. And on behalf of the family that is Galloway, we are absolutely delighted that you're here. And we are thrilled to partner with the Book Festival. Our leadership here at Galloway has a shared belief about the goodness of the Mississippi Book Festival and the good that it is doing for our state. And we believe that it points us to a better Mississippi. So thank you for coming out, for showing up, and for being a part of it. We want you to come and join us any Sunday morning for worship. And again now, thanks for coming and being with us today. Let me give the mic over to my friend, John Livingston.
Thank you, Carrie. Good morning. My name is John Livingston. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Mississippi Book Festival, and it is my pleasure to welcome each of you here in this beautiful, sacred space of Galloway Sanctuary. And I must say that after 2 years of doing the festival virtually, isn't it marvelous to be together again? And so I have a couple of housekeeping chores that I must ask you to observe. Cocktails will not be served in the sanctuary today, and I know you're terribly disappointed about that, but nonetheless. So no food or drink, please. It's one of our ways of honoring this sacred space. And a way of honoring our speakers today, I'm going to ask you to please silence your telephones. If you'll do that now, I'd be grateful. Thank you. It is so wonderful to see so many people here celebrating literature, the book, sharing of ideas, coming together not only as Mississippians, but also as Americans. It is such a privilege to have you here. And we are so very pleased to have one of our state's most distinguished gentlemen to introduce our moderator. And I'm going to ask President Thomas Hudson, president of Jackson State University, to introduce this conversation between Kiese Laymon and Alice Walker. President Hudson, please welcome President Hudson.
Good morning, everyone. I am indeed honored to introduce this historic conversation on behalf of the entire Jackson State University community and the Margaret Walker Center. We're here to celebrate not only the 40th anniversary of one of my favorite novels, Alice Walker's The Color Purple, but also the publication of the first volume of her journals. Kiese Laymon, who we're also here to celebrate, a native son who has written 2 memoirs and a novel. He's been described as a star in the American literary firmament, but today, when you pick up the copy of the 40th anniversary edition of The Color Purple, you will see that Kiese wrote the foreword. So who better than to have this conversation than him? At Jackson State University, we're excited to partner with and support the Mississippi Book Festival. It is so important that we grow our own and celebrate our own and also bring our own back home. So again, today, only today at this festival, will you get to hear these 2 phenomenal authors spend an hour together, and we're honored to be able to listen in. Thank you so much. Kiese Laymon.
Thank y'all so much for coming out today. Thank you, President Hudson, for leading Jackson State a place I call an alma mater, even though I only spent a semester there. But I feel like it's my alma mater because I was born and conceived on the campus. So that gives me a little bit of Jackson State cred for those who wonder why we wear the Jackson State swag so much. We are here, y'all, for Alice Walker. And there's so many things that I want to say and we're going to say about Alice Walker in this conversation. But the first thing I want to do is sort of give a little bit of context for why this is probably the most important thing that's ever happened in my professional life. When my mother was 19 years old, she was pregnant with me, and she had me right when she turned 20. We went to Wisconsin. She sent me back to Forest, Mississippi, where my grandmother lives, and then she moved back to Jackson probably in 1979, maybe 1980. And on our bookshelves at home, there was a book called Meridian. And again, my mama moved me back to her home of Forest while she was in Wisconsin doing grad school. And Forest was a small poultry town right outside of a larger town called Meridian. And so I remember as a young person who was always told to read and write, and always whooped if I did not read and write correctly, that Meridian on our bookshelf made me feel like the bookshelves necessarily were supposed to hold us. Because Meridian, in my mind, was about Meridian, Mississippi, right? And I think those of you who know Meridian know that it is not about Meridian, Mississippi at all. But that was my introduction to Alice Walker. And since then, I've read and taught The Color Purple a million times. So when she and Rebecca Walker asked me to write the foreword to the 40th anniversary edition of The Color Purple, I thought she was lying. I was like, who is catfishing me on a request over email? And then it turned out to be that she wasn't. And so, I mean, I think these sort of public gatherings are ripe for hyperbole, but I do not know that there is any kind of hyperbole that can speak to what Alice Walker has meant to me personally as an artist, as someone achieving to be a better radical lover, as someone achieving to be more tender with myself, my state, and my nation. Alice Walker taught me how to listen to trees. She taught me how to listen to the trees and the breeze and my grandmother's voice. And were it not for her, I definitely would not be sitting in front of y'all talking today. So I just want to say thank you, Alice Walker, for giving selfishly me a chance at achieving a dream that my grandmother and my mother actually could never dream themselves. So thank you for that. All right. I don't see it. Somebody want to?
Am I there yet? Hi.
Do you hear that? Do you hear that, Ms. Walker?
Yes, I did.
Yes,
Hello.
yes. Hello. We talked a few months ago, and I want to make sure that we don't have the same conversation. So we're going to root a little bit of this a little bit more in Mississippi, the Mississippi portion of the conversation we had about a few months ago. But first, I just want to say thank you for coming to Mississippi, as so many writers before you did, but actually creating art that fed Mississippians. A lot of times people come to our state and they take, and then they throw it out back into the world in a way that doesn't necessarily affirm Mississippian artists or Mississippian readers. So much of why we're here today is because you came here, you left, you came back, married. I want to talk about that. And you affirmed us. So thank you so much for that. But I want to ground this beginning of this conversation in talking about Miss Margaret Walker Alexander, if that's okay.
Oh, it's fine.
Yes, you had a relationship with Miss Margaret Walker Alexander, and the Mississippi folks who put on this incredible conference put the letter out that you sent to Margaret, one of the last letters that you sent to Margaret. I wonder if you could talk a bit about how important Margaret Walker was to you as a writer and as a sister, two distinctively different things.
She was an incredible force in my life in Mississippi, because there she was, this incredible writer but married with all these children. And it was a great mystery to me how she could do that and why it took, and then I understood it took her 20 years to write Jubilee. I don't know if you knew that. But part of the reason I wrote later an essay called One Child of One's Own was because I could see that with more than one, it's very challenging to have a creative life, especially if you're a woman, but also if you're a person of color, and even a white person who doesn't have, means to do whatever he or she would like to do. So she taught me in ways that I don't think she even realized. And I love Jubilee, but it should not have taken her 20 years to write it.
Right, right. And one of the things that we've talked about, and I want us to get us to kind of maybe push a little bit more on that, is that you write extensively in these journals about coming to Mississippi. And you write about the word soul and artistry and organic revolutionaries and radicals that you found in Mississippi. And I think that is so important as someone who came to the state to discover, to work, and to listen, to herald the radical, organic folks that you found here on the ground. Because so often I think our story gets written as if the people from the North came down to save us. Can you talk about what you saw and felt when you came to Mississippi the first time?
Yes, I came and I saw the heart that people had and the radical determination to have a better life for themselves and their children. And the foundation of that was actually love.
Yes.
They had so much love. I think that was their shield, as much as they could be protected. It was just the fierce love that they had themselves and the conviction that they could use that to change the situation. And they did.
Right.
I don't know, what Mississippi is like today, but I can assure you that if they had not struggled so hard and believed so, faithfully and worked so much, it would not be where it is today.
Right. And in your journals, you write about coming down here the first time and meeting a handsome Jewish lawyer who you went on to date. And then you all decided to come back. But when you came back, you were like, I ain't coming back unless we married.
Well,
Can you talk to us
because
about what that meant? Why did you need to be married when you came back?
Well, because it was against the law. And you should always go against bad laws.
Always.
I don't know what they are.
Yeah,
And
better clap
love,
that up.
and love must not be, ruled over by people who have no love themselves. Because that's really the root of why they try to control your love. They don't have any. And so it's partly envy, and then they have the power to tell you who you should live with. We do not accept that.
No.
Never. We will never accept it.
Never, ever. And one of the things that we said, I just want to do a quick sort of rewind to our conversation and pull out some of the highlights before we take it to a different place. One of the things that was so moving to me was when you made a distinction between what you found, particularly in Mississippi, and what you'd found in other parts of the Deep South. You talked about like there was a different kind of sort of politicalization in the folk that you might not have seen immediately in other places in the Deep South. And I wonder if you could talk about that.
I would love to talk about that, because what it was, and one of the things that attracted me was that the understanding of the situation was deeper.
Yes.
And the cruelty was so phenomenal, and the people had struggled so hard, and they lost so many people. In fact, during part of my time there, when they were looking for the 3 civil rights workers who were, killed, they found all kinds of bodies and decomposing, cadavers of a lot of them children. So the people had an awareness of their suffering and of what it was going to take to stand up to it. That I had been in the movement in Georgia. And we were okay, but we didn't have the same kind of depth that Black people in Mississippi had, or the few white people who also stood with us. Like Reverend Ed King and Jeanette. Their house was firebombed, and his face was disfigured because of it. And I bring this up because that was the other thing that was so remarkable about Mississippi. There were people, it attracted people that struggled. It attracted the real, deeply heart-centered people who wanted to change the situation of racism and violence in America.
Absolutely. I want to ask this question. Like, I want to pivot a bit to the color purple. Last time we talked about the journals. I want to talk about the journals and the color purple today. And one of the things that we talked briefly about in our last conversation was the question of whether you knew the entire time that you're making the color purple that you were creating what you called good medicine.
I did. I
Talk
had
about that.
Well, I had that sense because the old spirits just kept popping up and talking to me. And that's why I left New York City, because you can't hear a thing there.
I know that's right.
So I was trying to listen, and in fact, at some point, Suge Avery, was trying to say something in New York City, and finally she just said, well, what is all this tall shit anyway?
Yes.
Because in their countryside, they didn't have skyscrapers, they didn't have tall buildings, so it was all very strange to her.
Right.
And I attuned my existence. I got a divorce, I left New York City. I attuned my entire existence to be able to hear them. And I just took it as the most wonderful duty. I mean,
Right.
they are so, that's why I really appreciate your introduction to the book, because you help us to see, the people who need the medicine and the people who understood the medicine, which is really great. I mean, that's why your grandmother, could give you that hug. She understood the medicine.
Yeah, she did.
Mm-hmm.
She definitely understood that medicine.
Mm-hmm.
I want us to sort of try to bridge a few. My grandma was really sick, so you got me with that one. I want to try to bridge a few gaps right here, right now, because I'm taken by how in depth you talk about the importance of ownership in the journals. And I want to sort of contextualize this for folk, because I think that Alice Walker, for a lot of people in this room, has become so iconic and or revolutionary that some of us forget that she was a sharecropper's daughter. Which means a lot of things, but it has a particular meaning to what you think about how women generally, and black women specifically, might go about building homes, owning homes. And I just think it's really important for us to hear your voice of Alice Walker, the sharecropper's daughter, who is the iconic revolutionary. Talk about why it was so important and why it is so important for you to own homes in several places, and what that owning of homes in several places might do for your health and healing.
Well, I think you also should remember our history of not being able to, find a bed, not being able to find a hotel, not being able to find a town. There used to be these sundowner towns, where we had to be out of the town by sundown. So this, we moved almost every year, and it was not a good existence watching my parents agonize over, which new shack we could find.
Right.
So I teach wherever I can, in my circles of women, everywhere I go, that it is crucial that we find a way to have our own homes. And you see what is happening in America now. I mean, where's the housing for all the people who are losing their homes?
Right.
So I've tried to mentor collective buying, but in my own life, that has not really happened because I became too, quote, famous. But I think it's essential. So in my journals, if you read them, you will see that part of my anxiety constantly was how to raise enough funds to somehow manage to have a down payment on something I could afford, so that my child and I would not be, trying to get somewhere and someone would slam the door in our faces. Which, think of what that would have done to her. I mean, it would have been very hard for me, but for a child, it's just devastating.
Yes.
So we don't want any more of that. We want to learn how to, manage our money, find ways to own our own land, our own house.
Yes. And one of the things you do in the journals that I hope y'all have, a Gathering of Blossoms, if you haven't gotten them, I hope you get it soon. And again, just one of the things that I think, the clumsy way to talk about it is brave, but, I was just taken by the way you talk about professional jealousies. Not as something that existed over there, but it's something that is going to exist in all of us. So we might need to preempt that by collectivizing and talking about that. And you root that conversation in a group that you started with June Jordan. And then you specifically talk about, some of the feelings you felt when Toni Morrison sold her first book, who was a friend of yours, and you over there being like, wait a minute now, where's mine? But I think it was so important for me to read you saying that. And I wonder if you could give us a little bit more context about why that was important.
Well, we come from a culture where people actually do like the truth. I mean, we do. It's kind of a shortcut, to get you where you're going, rather than going all around, wherever. And we are human beings, and so we often feel these twinges of envy, of jealousy, of why couldn't I have more of that, and they have a little too much of that, and da da da. So what you do is really sit with that and own it. And see it in the culture, and see where it leads people in the culture, usually to a dead end of some sort.
Yes.
And then you gather your friends and you collectively decide, that you don't want to go that route. You want to be able to, when something happens to one of us, we accept that in a way it's happening to all of us. And so you do away with that envy and you do away with that jealousy to the extent that you can manage it. And I think I left that in there just so I want us to be as real as possible.
Yes.
We will not get anywhere by faking it.
No.
We won't. No. And so that's why that's there. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And the sisterhood was great. With the first meeting, we had a giant pot of gumbo that I made in a big red pot. And we gathered around and we ate that gumbo and we talked and we understood that the system is set up to make one of us the one.
Right.
And that's the one they go to, and then the others are just kind of struggling along, somewhere in the shadow.
Yes.
You have to live with that. You can always decide that all of you will be in the circle of light because you're in the circle of the light of your sisters and sometimes your brothers, but
Absolutely.
definitely for women, make your own circle of light. And no matter where their light shines, your light always shines on everyone.
Yes. And y'all were artists who were in some ways beginning. So can you just tell everybody the names of some of the people in the sisterhood?
Nana Maynard, whom you may not know, Zaki Shange, June Jordan, Toni Morrison, I can't think of everybody, but who can you think of?
I just wanted you to name some icons, man. I just wanted
to make Rose Benner.
Yes.
I don't know if you know her. She's incredible. She's a wonderful cook. She's a great cook, and she wrote a wonderful cookbook.
Cooking. Margaret said that cooking was foundational to the sisterhood. Margaret Walker said, I mean, did you experience that too?
Well, well, for me, learning to make a really, really good gumbo, the kind you have in New Orleans, I mean, that was my contribution.
Okay.
That took so much of my energy, I don't remember anybody else's cooking.
I interviewed Nikki Giovanni about a year ago, and I gotta say, I was sort of shocked at how competitive she still is about her cooking. She swore she was the best cook out of all y'all by far, and I was just like, are you sure?
Well, she wasn't a part of the circle, though.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm sure she was over there cooking something magical, in her own land.
Yes. You are amazing. You are amazing. I wanna talk for a second, and this is, we talked a lot about the journals in our last conversation, but I really want to sit in Suge Avery for a bit, if that's okay with you.
Good. Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
Let's sit in Suge. My first question, and it should be my last, but my first question is, does she still talk to you?
Well, I think I become more her, actually, as I get older. But she's probably my favorite character in a way, because she has just finished with caring about what people think about her.
Right. Right. I feel like we don't talk enough as people who try to make art about the characters we create who are aspirational. personally. Like sometimes we want to become more like those folk when other people sometimes think we're being mimetic, like we're writing ourselves. And here, it's so interesting to hear you say that you were writing a version of you that at that point you had not become.
Exactly. Yeah. No, freedom. I think that's what you do in a way. If you're writing really from your heart and deeply immersed in your own life, especially your dream life. I
Right.
mean, which mine has always been incredibly rich and
Right.
good for me. But you can't avoid, I think, somehow glimpsing a greater freedom for
Yes.
yourself, and a
Yes.
greater freedom then for everyone. And so you create characters who lead you. She later writes a new, religious tract
Right.
because she emerges, as this being who finally has a grasp of how the whole thing works or
Right.
doesn't, you
Right.
know.
Right. And
So it's called The Gospel According to Shug.
the gospel according to Shug. You know that's right. And when you created Shug, right, in the midst of creating this good medicine that you say you were aware of, right? Whether or not people are gonna take it is another question. And was the creation of Shug a kind of good medicine for yourself? Though I know it had to be hard. Were you taking the medicine while creating the medicine that Shug became?
Well, the bitter medicine I was taking,
Bitter medicine. Can you talk about
various
that?
kinds,
Yeah.
yeah, various kinds of abuse, various kinds of misunderstanding,
Right.
getting, having a wonderful marriage for 5 or 6 years, and then, having a breakdown basically because, Mississippi and the work we were doing, not our people, but the situation just became unbearable.
Right.
And so I had to be creating medicine for myself, to stay alive. And that is partly what writing is. It's medicine that you give yourself as you're doing it.
And so you started writing some of that here,
Well, it started writing itself inside me here.
inside you. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, but I was writing, actually, when I lived in Mississippi, I was writing about the sharecropping system in the Third Life of Grange Copeland because
Yes.
I wanted to explore, the ways in which that lineage of sharecropping undermines our health and how impoverished we have been because of it, and how it connects to the way we were not truly freed
Right.
when emancipation came.
Right.
I mean, we were forced back to the plantations, basically. And in
Yes.
fact, we still own a little bit of the land from Grant's Plantation, which is, where my grandparents, the Grants, lived and had their children, but long ago, where the master lived,
Right.
gave them his name.
The color purple specifically feels like a almost a treatise on freedom, on or freeness. The explorer that want to discover freeness. But I'm interested in what role discipline plays in that exploration of freeness and freedom. When I think about The Color Purple, I literally think about a book that taught me, in addition to my grandmother, how to pray. Right? I mimicked my grandmother getting on my knees. Color Purple taught me that I could also pray to those trees that saw us, right?
Exactly.
Which meant everything.
Right.
But I'm interested if we could talk a bit about, because I haven't asked you about this before, but what role, if at all, does discipline play in exploring the sort of like outer ranges of or the inner ranges of our most free self?
I am extremely disciplined.
Yes.
And I have learned, as I've gotten, older, that is crucial. That is why I meditate. That is why I walk. That is why I've done yoga. I mean, all of those things are ways that you build your strength, and gather yourself. We are so fractured in this culture
Yes.
because that's the kind of culture it is. They sell you more things if there are more of you spread out all over everywhere,
Right.
to sell to. And you're never really in your own core.
Yes.
So the discipline for many of us has to be to learn what that is and to live there,
Right.
to live there.
Right.
And it is in that way, I think, that we can become free, because we have a greater understanding of what we need in our lives to express this wonder that we are.
Yes.
I mean, we're incredible. I mean, each being is a miracle,
Right. And
but often you don't see that.
right. We don't. You have to wander and dig and but I'm also taken by this idea of good medicine and how you dealt with folks not just taking it as bad medicine, but some folks took the color purple as cyanide, right? And I would say some of the people who took it as cyanide were folk who needed to understand that it was the best medicine that we'd ever been offered. So I want to end that question by saying thank you for writing Mr. Thank you for creating a book that loved Mr. And what do you, as the creator of this book, do with the fact that a few very loud people did not take the creation of Mr. as good medicine? What do you do with that?
Well, it was a great mystery until I realized that they didn't read the book. I mean, I sometimes think about how nice it would have been if our brother Farrakhan, for instance, who really hated it, had actually read it. He would have found himself in there, and he would have found his own father in there, and he would have found, the reconciliation that can happen among people who grow. I mean, that's all we can do as human beings. We can grow. But if we refuse to see where we need to grow, we won't. So I felt very sad for us because I felt like, there'll be a million R. Kellys in the world because a lot of people refuse to see what makes an R. Kelly.
Wow.
And it was an offering.
Wow.
It was an offering.
Wow.
It was saying, look at this, look at what has happened to us. And I don't separate us out exactly, but look at what happens to us and what do we do with how deformed, we have become.
Yes.
And love is the transformative, ingredient here. And so I Mr. is based on my grandfather, as you know, who was a terrible man long before I knew him when he was a young man. And I had to understand why he became so warped, because he was warped. He wasn't born that way. And so that's when I, was so happy that I had spent a year with them when I was 8 years old. And I was wounded, and my grandmother and my grandfather, they held me like your grandmother held you. And I felt that love. It's indestructible.
It's indestructible.
And so all of that went into creating this. And I wasn't going to play him short by making him more palatable.
Right.
I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to make him a cartoon. He was not. He was terrible as a young man.
Yes.
And he grew. And I saw that. I mean, I saw that in the way he was with me, his granddaughter.
Yes.
And that's my gift. I give him, back to us, in his reclamation of soul.
Right. Growing up as a younger writer, I was afraid to write my body into political context. I could what people call intellectualize. I could talk. I could blah blah blah. But I was afraid to actually reckon with what my body meant in some of these spaces. And you talked earlier about this notion of bad laws need to be broken. And one of the bad laws I think you broke, writerly laws, is you, in The Color Purple specifically, is you explored a varied Black women's desire as messily and hungrily and at times scarily as I'd ever seen it done. And I wondered, did you think you were breaking a rule when you did that?
No, I didn't care.
Yes.
My duty was to her.
Yes.
My duty was to my grandmother. My duty was to all these women, that we've all seen in the South. There they were with, I don't know if people still wear head rags, but they used to wear head rags and dip snuff and they'd have, 50 limb cheering, as they used to say. Who were these women?
Right.
What were their dreams? What would happen if we could liberate them?
Yes.
And we see that Celie becomes liberated.
Yes.
And we see that that her sister refused, to be dominated and ended up in Africa. I mean, a whole world away.
Right.
And that was the other thing, if you are around some of these old plantations, like many of us were, we could see how your little world was so tiny, and it was kept tiny deliberately, so you'd never know. The first time I went to Europe, and I went to Helsinki, and I almost from the minute I touched the ground, there were all these fairly cute guys in Finland wanting to dance, and wanted to just be friends. I almost had a heart attack. It was so weird.
Right.
I mean, I had never seen a kind, open white person. I had just never seen that. And it was just like magic. And actually, this is something I would like, white people, especially in Mississippi, to have some sense of that too. Like how, I mean, maybe now they don't need to do that, but when I was growing up, I felt for them because they had no way of knowing how to cross over. They had no way to, they could never even say hello without feeling like they were betraying something.
Yes.
And that's a terrible way. And then to see actual free white people, I mean, it was just like, wow, they can be like this.
Right.
They can just want to dance.
They
Which
can-
I love. So I was having a great time.
Right. Right. I would love to read essay like in Helsinki, I discovered white people dancing
Yeah.
for the first time.
For the first time.
I love it. I love
It was
it.
it was so liberating, really.
I love
and,
it.
and I wanted all of the Southern white people to have that experience, just see what they look like and what they're like without the baggage.
Yes.
Racism is just, it's a heavy load.
It's a lot. And last time we talked, I asked you why it was so important for you to have your papers, because we were talking primarily about the journals in Georgia and in Atlanta. And your first response was, I'm a Southerner. I'm a Southerner. What does that mean? Like, so when you just said what you said to the white people of Mississippi, what does being a Southerner mean? And I'm interested in this notion of regionalism, right? Because, growing up in Mississippi, grew up around all these white folk who claim to be regionalists. But the weird thing is they never herald or make heroes of the region's most heroic folks if they're black, right? So I'm interested in what you do with that. Like, how do we make sense of folks who call themselves regionalists, who necessarily base that regionalism on the explicit and implicit attempt to erase the most vulnerable people of the region who are also, I think, the most heroic? What kind of regionalism is that?
Well, the bad kind. Because it's limited. It's limited. And I would want all of us to feel for all of us. We all have so much to offer. Now, what comes to mind is Flannery O'Connor in Georgia, because we lived across the road from her when I was a child. And I grew up, to read her, of course, and was dismayed by some of the early things where she was, just being a regular racist white person.
Right.
But then she outgrew it.
Yeah.
She outgrew it, although some people now are still trying to hold her to, her non-growth, which I think is another, just pit hole. I mean, you don't want to do that. You want to see instead that, this person, for reasons that we well understand, the culture, had these ideas. She had never in her life sat at a table with a black person and had tea, for instance, and talked about novels, or talked about, peacocks or whatever. She just never had that experience.
Right.
So it's cruel, I think, then to blame her for being who she actually was raised to be. And I take the position that she later was heroic in changing that.
Right.
I mean, she opened her eyes and she looked at the whole thing and she went, oh, no, it's not that way quite at all. Some parts, are still true, but some parts are just lies and they're deforming us. I want everybody in the South to be joyful. That is my prayer.
Yes.
That
Yes.
we learn to be joyful, that we like each other, that we look at each other and we have smiles instead of frowns. Have to really deal with that. And people in our culture care so much about what they have rather than what they are, that they get stuck.
Right.
And that's a tragedy.
People in our culture care so much about what they have as opposed to what they are. And if you care about what you are, you can then concern yourself with what you can be.
Right.
Right, right. I feel that. I feel that deeply.
Mhm.
I have a few other questions that I want to ask, and these are these kind of questions that you probably should ask Alice Walker if you ever get to be in a small room with Alice Walker. We in a big room with Alice Walker and a lot of other people. So I'm just gonna push myself to ask these questions that are very hard. Was there a point after The Color Purple success where you questioned at all the film?
Oh, before success, I got the biggest headache I had in my life. I thought it was a cartoon.
Okay, can we talk about the cartoon The Color Purple directed by Steven Spielberg?
Well, that's how it felt.
Yeah.
Steven sent the film up to San Francisco. I saw it with two other people in a gigantic theater, and everything looked wrong. It was just too big. It was too loud. The White House was just ridiculous, and it still is, because, that's not the kind of house you'd have in
Right.
Georgia, the
Right.
plantation. Anyway, so I saw really the critics, they missed a lot. I saw most of it. I mean, I'm sure, all the things that were not right. I almost died. I was trying to figure out how I was going to say how much I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Because I'm very honest.
Right. Yeah.
I wouldn't lie. And I
Yeah.
was thinking, now they're going to have me on Good Morning America tomorrow. And how am I going to say that this film is just, terrible? However, I went to see it later with my family, for one thing. My mother, she was bedridden by then, but we got her dressed and put on her slippers and wheeled her in there. And, my cousins, my sister, all kinds of people. And as we were sitting there together, and I realized, I saw it for the first time. I saw what they saw. They didn't know that I had been watching every single, as much as I could, shoot all the shooting of it, so that I was looking for the best part. To them, what they saw was the best part.
Oh.
And that changed it for me. So now I love it. I love it because I see that, to me, it's still not the medicine. It's not the strong medicine that I
Right.
wanted.
Right.
It really isn't, because Stephen didn't have that vision, really.
Right. Right.
But it's good enough. It's good
Yes.
enough to get us, moving.
Yes. Yes. And another hard question I want to ask you, and it's hard because I'm in front of people, and you're not up here with me necessarily, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. I'm interested, Miss Walker. At this point in your career, after creating so much art that has made so many of us feel not as lonely, among other things, what do you do with loneliness?
Oh, that's a very good question. And it's a good question now, because so many people are lonely.
Right.
And they're always wondering how to fill it,
Yes.
how to not have it. I choose to have it.
You love it. Yeah. You seek it.
No, it's not that I'm seeking it. It's not that I love it. It's that it's inevitable. We're all lonely at times. And what I'm saying here is that you just deal with it. You take it as a fact of life, that there are times when you are going to be as lonely as anything on this planet.
Right.
And you know that if you can just be with it, maybe
Yes.
there's something you can do while you're lonely, plant something.
Yes.
But it's just a fact of life. There are no people anywhere who are not capable of being lonely.
Yes.
It happens to us. It's a human condition.
Absolutely.
And lucky for us, we don't have to stay there, but we do have to endure it.
Have to
And try
endure.
to endure it without, any kind of doctoring, smoking something, drinking something, eating too much chocolate.
Damn, you smell the Reese's all the way over there? Hey. Kit
No,
Kats, I got a pocket full of Kit Kats right now.
but see, it's just that I have lived. I mean, I have lived these stages, and I have watched them make their full circle.
Yes.
I mean, and that's what you trust life. Trust life to always propel you forward in some direction that you want to go in,
Right.
rather than dropping you in some trough, of sugar, where then you have to deal with depression.
Yeah.
Loneliness is different from depression.
Right.
And you can avoid depression by not overdoing something bad in your loneliness.
Yes.
See?
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. And when we inevitably sometimes do, as a nation, as a people, as a state, as a region, indulge in those bad things, your books and your life tell us, and these journals tell us, that we can go back and reckon with that work
Absolutely.
and make it sing, right? Make it into something that it didn't
And
want
let
to
me
be.
just point this out in the journals. One of the things I really was happy to share is how with journals you can actually track the way that you fall into these periods of depression and sadness,
Right.
and just shoot me now, right? Just get me out of my misery. You can actually track that if you keep a good journal. And one of the things that I learned by doing that was that whenever I had a lot of sugar, coffee, all those things that you kind of normally
Right.
take, those were things that often precipitated the very dreadful feeling later on.
Yes.
So if you can just track that, in a journal or however you can do that, so you can avoid it, And
Yes.
for women, I hope there are a lot of women in the audience, but
Definitely.
definitely pre-period, don't go in for all the stuff that your body tries to fool you into thinking you really want.
Wow.
Otherwise known as cravings,
Wow. You.
because you really then are setting yourself up for a headache, a hangover, depression, sadness. You just don't know why you're in this relationship with this person, blah, blah, blah. And it's all just hormones and bad diet.
Right. And one of the things that I think we have to talk about is, especially in this sanctuary, is again, a lot of us have read everything that we know you've published, but I tell y'all, if y'all have not read these journals, in a way, I think it's safe to say you might not have read Alice Walker yet. Because I think these journals give us a different kind of context, right? I said this to you before. It's not just like behind the scenes. It's behind the scenes, and let me contextualize what created this scene. So I'm interested if you could talk to me at all about if you felt any apprehension writing so revealingly about not a character named Alice, but Alice Walker in these journals. Like you reveal so poetically and so amazingly crafted so much about you that folks had no idea. And did you feel any anxiety about that?
Well, they don't really need to have an idea. I mean, the thing about life is that you accept that you're just a human being. I mean, what in there is not human?
Right.
I mean, did I turn into an alligator at some point? I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I think that we should all have the freedom to express what we are. I mean, I'm just like anything here. I'm like a rose. I'm like a sunflower. I'm like, turnips. I mean, I'm like, I have a right to be this way. I
Yes.
think that's my bedrock,
Yes.
that this way that I am, I have a right to that.
Yes.
Now, you cannot, want it. You don't take it. It's not for you. But, just as we would not want, I'm looking here at an orchid someone gave me, and I'm thinking, well, would I just decide to shear off half of this orchid because it's just too much of orchidness?
Right.
No,
Right. Right.
this is what you get.
Absolutely.
This is what life gave me,
Yes.
and I'm sharing that.
And one of the things that I think I think it's sort of weaved through your work in amazingly different ways, is this question of friendship, right? And we can talk about that a lot in The Color Purple. But I wanna sort of maybe start ending this conversation by talking about the importance of the friendship you had with one of our friends, and a dear mentor to me, Valerie, who edited the journals. And I wonder if you could talk about that friendship and how the editor relationship in that friendship affected and impacted that friendship.
Well, trust was the foundation. And this is something I would like to say to people, who are there and younger people who may not be there. But it's really essential to connect yourself with and to other people who have some credentials in terms of stability in their own consciousness and trust, And so with Valerie, I had Zora's biography that she'd done,
Right.
Zora Hurston. I don't think there could be a better biography of Zora. I mean, I just, I definitely won't be alive to see anybody else try it, I'm
Right.
sure. But I don't think there will ever be a better one. And when you see what people produce, that's how you know them. In fact, that is, if their work is terrible, don't go near them. Really, there's no point, and you waste your time. So when I read her book on Zora, and I understood that she gave up, her job or whatever, I don't know how long, but, she went down to Florida and, commune with the ocean and the trees and the sand and, and tried to find it. I mean, she was just inevitable as someone that I would trust enough to do this.
Right.
I couldn't think of anyone else.
Yes, yes. And one of the things that you talk about her doing is sometimes she would push you to quote unquote take some of the things out that she thought might not be in your best interest, like as Alice Walker the human, right? Like she would push you sometimes to be a little afraid of writing some things, but trust must have been the foundation for you accepting some of those editorial decisions.
Oh, absolutely, and she was right. I mean, and some of them were legal things.
Right.
There are people who really don't want you to say certain things about them, even if you're just saying they're cute, I mean,
Yes.
they might be offended. So she was very good about, saying, well, what do you think, this person or that person, how would they be? And we had legal advice as well, because my intention was, of course, not to harm anyone. It was more than about, in most cases, loving them and being very interested in portraying them as admirable. It's not, there are no hatchet jobs, but at the same time, it's this person living her life, and she is a writer.
Yes.
Now I have to say to people in the audience that writers can be dangerous. I mean, in some ways. I mean, so if you fall in love with a writer, love them as much as you can, but be aware that they are what they are. And I think they are.
This is you being courageous, talking to a room full of writers this way. I feel you. Yes, we are a dangerous sort. Absolutely.
We are, and we can't help it. I mean, when Van Gogh went out into the field and he started painting, the Starry Night, I mean, he did that because he's an artist. What else would he do?
Right.
And that's like us. I mean, people often say, oh, you write so much and, you see da-da-da-da, but that's just who I am.
Yes.
And I was born to be this way. And that goes back to what we were saying, about, the orchid or the tulip or the pine tree. I mean, they are what they are.
Yes.
That's what they are. You can't make a pine tree into a rose.
Yes.
I
do know. I'm being told we have one more minute, so I want to ask this one more question. Completely selfish. So in this question, Mississippi is me, but I'm not gonna say that. So what is your wish for Mississippi in the future?
Well, and I hope the future is now.
The future is now.
I don't think we should keep putting things off. We don't have much future from the looks of things anyway.
That's right.
And not to leave on a down note, but Be completely free and true to who you are, and try to develop your capacity to love. Love is basically the only thing, I think, that will really save us from what's looming. And what does that mean? It means a lot of study so that you understand the pieces in the culture and how they're being played and what is happening and who's doing what to whom. Is to ask the question about why Bill Gates has bought up so much farmland. It's to know about the Dutch farmers who are on strike, in Holland. I mean, it's to realize that the world is vast,
Yes.
but all the pieces actually fit if you take the time to look. So Mississippi, like anywhere else, is going to require that people knuckle down and try to understand where we are at this point in our evolution, if that's what it is.
I just want to say thank you for loving us. Thank you for loving Mississippi. And thank you for giving us that good medicine that a lot of us actually took and received. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you. Bye-bye. And I love you.
I love you too. Thank you.
Questioning, Mr. Laymon. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Marvelous. I just want to ask you to do me one favor. We have a lot of people in here. Please be respectful of your neighbors. Exit slowly and carefully, and have a marvelous rest of the Mississippi Book Festival. Thank you.